Welcome to the Big Movement Podcast. If you're ready to create results and make huge strides in your business, finances, personal development, and health, then you're in the right place. Pushing past excuses and powering through procrastination can be a challenge alone. Here, you'll get the support, tools, and knowledge you need to get to the level you desire in your business and life. Let's get started with your host, Byron Ingram.
And welcome to another episode of the Big Movement Podcast. Today, we have a special guest. We have Marc Mawhinney, who is on a mission to help coaches build stronger businesses. He's a lifelong entrepreneur with his podcast, The Natural Born Coaches, and his coaching programs to help people, especially coaches, understand what they need to do to be successful in their business. So let's give a warm welcome to Marc Mawhinney. Marc, welcome.
Hey, Byron. Thanks for having me.
Oh, sure. Definitely. So, Marc, tell us a little bit about your background, because I was reading through your bio and everything. It's like, wow, you have this extensive background that people should know about.
Well, let me know if you ever want me to come down to Dallas to record. We could do a follow-up because I'm a big fan of the TV show Dallas. So we could go to South Fork and do it on site. We could talk about J.R. Ewing and all that other stuff.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, my background is really I've been in business since I was 21, and now I'm a few years away from the big 4-0. So I like to think I'm a ways away, but it's approaching. And so I've been in business for close to 20 years, one way or another since I was, a young adult. And it started in real estate. And I did that for over a decade and had a lot of great years. And then I had some rough times, like a lot of people in real estate in around 2009-ish. I went through a business closure. So I'm in Canada, and you guys got hit hard in 2008 with the financial, the Great Recession. And then it took a little while and it caught up here up to the Great White North. So 2009 went through a really, rough year that way and stumbles and stuff. But that led me into a bit coaching business. I was helped back to my feet by several coaches and mentors. So I thought, wow, what a great thing to do, for your business and for your life. And I said, I want to get into this. And that's really how I got into coaching, which I've been doing since then and having a lot of fun with it.
Oh, very nice. It's always interesting to see how people go from one career to the next, that there's some defining moment. Either it's driven by just an event by itself, or it's because someone helped them and there's an inspiration. You know what? I like this. I want to do it too. So when you made that leap into coaching, was it just simply you hung your shingle on the wall and said, I'm a coach, and then you had this flock of people coming to you?
Well, I'm like a lot of entrepreneurs. I tend to jump off the edge of the cliff and then hope I can build the plane before I hit the ground. And it's like a ball of flames and I'm dead. So that's really how it happened with coaching. I tend not to overthink things. So there's some people who want to work on a business plan for a year. They want to do all these tons of surveys. They want to do research. They want to know absolutely everything about it. And then that just has a way to boggle your mind, confuse you, kill your motivation, and you don't get it launched. So for me, I jumped in really quickly with, I said, hey, you know what? I want to be a coach. I joined a group coaching program to learn, the ins and outs of coaching, and I just jumped in, and that's really how I got into it. So I tend to instead, Mark Ford, but he uses a pen name Michael Masterson, wrote a great book, and it's called Ready, Fire, Aim. And I think that's my approach to business and life: ready, fire, aim, as opposed to ready, aim, fire.
And, I always love that expression, because you think about how many people, they get stuck on the aim part. They're talking about it. They're planning it some more, and then they're planning more. And then like 5 years go by and they haven't done anything, versus the person that jumps in like, I just did it.
I think there's probably someone out there planning like a jukebox or something. He's been planning it since like the 40s or whatever, and right. He still hasn't launched it. Now he's like, okay, it's ready to go. Oops. And you see it especially now with tech moving so quickly. You hear people that had a great idea 5 years ago, but it's dated already. It's just with the speed of everything going on in the world. So I'm a big fan of just jumping first. I cannot stand when people, it's okay to have fear. Everybody has fear, but at some point you got to jump. And when I see someone I know could could do really well with something if they only got out of their own way and just did it. It's really frustrating for me to see it. I just want to grab them by the neck and throw them into the deep end of the pool and say, there you go, learn how to swim.
Right, exactly. And there's a lesson I think everybody can learn from the technology sector, since you mentioned the tech world. It's that instead of trying to make something perfect, you just do releases. You think of, with the latest version of the iPhone, with the version 10.0 of the iOS, that shortly after it was released, guess what? They sent out an update.
Yeah.
So you have to think of the same thing, like just get it out there, that there's always going to be those things like, oh, we can make this better. Just do it.
It's that concept of MVP, minimum viable product, and
right.
I've always been a fan of doing that, even with my online programs and things I put out there for my coaching business. I want to get it out there as quick as possible. So I want it to, if it's 7 out of 10 or so, then I can work on improving it and work to get up to 10 out of 10, which is impossible anyways. There's never going to be, something that's absolutely perfect. So I'm not putting stuff out there that's a 1 out of 10 that's not completed or whatever. It's good, but, I don't slow things down to try to make it perfect, and it's worked well for me.
Right, and that's just a great way to do it. You have to simply run with what you got and then make it better. So after you dived in with your coaching business, what were some of those things that you noticed right away that you might not have learned otherwise, other than just doing it in terms of growing a business?
Well, what I learned really quickly is that you could be the best coach in the world, but people aren't going to rush to your door. You're going to have to get out there and you're going to have to tell them. You're going to have to blow your own horn. Now, some people, especially in the internet world, blow their horn probably a little too much.
Right.
There's a few people who are full of it, 1 or 2 or maybe 3. But if you sit, maybe 4 or 5. But if you sit back and you expect people, hey, I'm great, but I'm not going to let people know that, they're just not going to get to you, because it's such a noisy, crowded marketplace. And I mean, I see it with my clients. I deal exclusively with coaches. I'm helping them build their businesses and get set up and get rolling. And I've worked with some people who are very humble people, but they're great at what they do. And I've said to clients before, you got to start talking about your wins, because I know about your wins from what we've been able to do with the results from our coaching sessions and stuff. But if I were Joe Smith living 1,000 miles away in Timbuktu, I wouldn't know that you were doing that well, because you're afraid to put it out there. And usually they'll admit, I don't want to look like a braggart, or they don't want to look like Donald Trump. They think if they put out a positive thing for themselves or share a win or talk about how great they are, they're like Donald Trump. And I tell them, hey, you got to just put it out there. Don't worry about that.
You mean they have bad hair?
Yes, that too. Yeah, no comment. I'm Canadian, so I'm staying out of the whole presidential election. I'm not honestly. I'm not a big Hillary Clinton fan. I got to turn the TV on mute during the election, the debates when she's talking. But I'm Canadian, so I can stay out of it.
And you mentioned something that's really great, just by bringing up politics briefly, where I think so many entrepreneurs, they shoot themselves in the foot. When you start talking about certain topics, things from politics to religion and things on social media, it can be an immediate turnoff to a good chunk of potential clients.
Yeah, I mean, I love politics. I'm a poli-sci major from back in the day, and I got to give you guys credit. Your politics are entertaining. Like, that meme, the meme that you see online with Michael Jackson from Thriller eating the popcorn in the theater? That's kind of how I am. Like, if I wasn't careful, I would dive completely into U.S. politics, and it would just take over my life. So I'm really careful not to fall into the rabbit hole too much. I like following it. I watch the debates, and I check in and stuff, but I make sure that it's not too much. And I see some people out there that I put a post on Facebook the other day talking about this. I said, if some people put half the effort that they put into debating politics online into their businesses, they would be rolling. Because, like they're looking at oh my God, during the first presidential debate, some of them were just live posting, live tweeting every 2 minutes. But then they say, oh, well, I don't have time to build a business. There's no way I have no time. Yeah, but you got time to run down the candidate that you hate, and all this stuff. So I say put your own energy into your own life and your own business. Don't rely on politicians. politicians have lied since the dawn of time, and they're going to continue to do it to get your vote. If you're putting your faith in a politician and that's where you're dependent upon that outcome of your candidate winning for your success, you're screwed. Don't worry about the politician. Build your own economy, really.
Right, exactly. Because after a while, you realize very quickly, just like you said, the politicians are not going to solve the problems. It's going to come to something simple. You're going to do whatever it takes to grow your business. And then whoever is in office is going to present some opportunities, going to present some challenges, and you're going to adapt accordingly. But regardless, they're not going to come knocking on your door and say, I'm here to save you. Congratulations. It's never happening.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I always laugh when I see people like, oh, if so-and-so wins, I'm moving to Canada. We've got a place called Cape Breton, which is in my part of the world. It's the next province over, and they put out an offer for people who want to move to Canada to rate specifically to Cape Breton if Donald Trump won. And the website's got like a crazy amount of hits, and you hear it with immigration too. With the Canadian immigration websites and pages end up getting a lot more hits every 4 years. It was the same way whether it's Republicans with Bush or if it was Obama. You always get that one side says, "Oh, if the other side wins, I'm going to move away." It's like, you're not going to pick up your family and move to Canada. I love Canada. Don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful country. You're not going to move to another country because your candidate doesn't win. And you hear celebrities say it too. And I don't know if there's ever been a celebrity that's actually done it. I'd like to see it. It'd be cool. But yeah, it's funny. It's interesting. But it's a lot of brain power that you could spend on that.
Oh, totally. And you think about how much energy can be done in productive ways on social media. And like right now, what do you see with coaches being the most effective way of getting their messages out on social media through all the noise? Since it seems like every day you're looking at some type of ad that says, hey, work 2 hours a week and get tens of thousands of clients. Okay, that's a little absurd, but
7 figures in 5 minutes a day from in your hot tub.
Right, exactly.
Oh, I mean, first of all, pick the medium that you like the most and that you're comfortable with it. So Facebook's my big one. I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff too, but Facebook's where I get a lot of business. But if you absolutely hate Facebook, then don't beat your head against the wall and try to like it. Use Instagram, use one of the other ones out there. There's tons of social media networks or blogging or videos, whatever. But whatever you choose to do, the biggest key is consistency. And I think the problem I see with coaches is they think that it's okay to post just a little bit. Oh, I'll put up a post a day and people will beat a path to my door. No, man, you're going to have to put like 10 posts up a day or more. You're going to have to be in people's faces all the time. So same way with me, with my email list, I do daily emails to my list. And I have some coaches saying, oh, you shouldn't do that. You might offend people and it's too much or whatever. And the way I look at it is I'd rather err on the side of being in their face too much than too little and risk offending them. Anyone I've ever lost that unsubscribes because they say I'm emailing too much, they wouldn't have been a buyer anyways or a client. So why waste my time on those ones? And so consistency is the biggest thing, just to make sure you're putting that effort in there. And unfortunately, most people don't put enough effort in. It's lukewarm. It's inconsistent. They're not doing enough every day, and that's why they're not getting results.
Right, exactly. You have to put that energy in that makes sense. Like you said earlier, if people put the same amount of energy they did is talk about politics, they could really be growing their business substantially. And that's where we're at.
I've got a coach on my Facebook list. I like him. He's a nice guy, but he's the most anti-Trump person I've ever seen. Like he really hates Trump, and every 10 minutes he's posting something about it. And I thought if he put that effort, forget about Donald Trump and stuff, put that effort into his business, you know what? He'd be ahead of Tony Robbins by now. He'd be blowing Tony out of the water and Brendan Bouchard and Marie Forleo and all these other ones if he did it. I feel like saying to him, I get it that you feel strongly about it, but put the effort into that. So, nice guy and stuff like that. And I talked to him before about it. He said, I could do both or whatever. Well, no, man who chases 2 rabbits catches neither, right? Confucius.
So. Right, exactly. Like, have you seen how fast rabbits run? Good luck chasing them both.
I've never actually caught a rabbit or tried to catch a rabbit, so.
No, I looked and said, if I really want a rabbit, I will either go to the store or I'll ask someone that's caught one because I'm not chasing it.
Actually, that's not true. I play one of the Mario games with my little guy. I have an 8-year-old son, and one of the levels where Mario and Luigi and we're chasing, there's a rabbit. So that's not true. I have actually caught a rabbit. Just it was a video game with my 8-year-old.
It still counts in some way. It's a rabbit,
yeah. It takes skill, that's a funny thing. I thought, I used to play a lot of video games when I was a kid. I'll be able to kick his butt. That 8-year-old kicks my butt. He's like, Dad, you've fallen off the cliff now 10 times. You suck, or whatever. He's now showing me how. And I'm competitive, right? I'm the type, I play Monopoly or Risk or any of those board games and I get competitive. So I have to kind of subdue my competitive streak there as I'm getting killed by shells and flames and all the other stuff for the Mario games.
Right. Now, you mentioned, because you have a son there, how are you creating that balance between the work life and the family life? Because obviously, you have to work more than 4 hours in a week, but at the same time, you still want to, watch your son grow up versus who are you? Where did this little kid go from those in diapers to this person kicking my tail in Mario Kart?
Well, my situation, it's not a unique situation because a lot of people nowadays are with it, but his mother and I separated back when he was about 2.5 years old. And we get along great, which is perfect for him and stuff. But in some ways, it's great. I'm not suggesting you go out and get divorced. Anyone who's listening, not saying that's the way to do it. But it means I can work my butt off when I don't have him, so that when I do have him, that I can focus on him. But I mean, it's still a challenge. I still have to fight that urge, and I don't always win it to check my email, check my phone, and stuff like that when I'm with him. So I do tell him, hey, I'm doing this for you, buddy. But sometimes it's a Saturday morning and he says, Dad, you're on the laptop again. And it's an addiction. I mean, it's part of what I think it's because of all those years in real estate. I had a phone up to my ear and I was used to working close to 24/7. So when I went over to coaching, that came over with me, that workaholism that I have to definitely watch myself, because I could very easily work 24/7 if I didn't check myself. And I don't want him to see that either. So I want him to see that, hey, you can work hard, but you can also enjoy yourself. And I've been getting better with balance. I'm not quite there yet. I'm, like we talked about earlier, it's not a 10 out of 10. It's a 7 out of 10 right now for balance, but I'm getting there.
Right. Exactly. But, that's important that you recognize that, as there's so many people when it comes to growing a business, they try to keep that typical, let's say, 9-to-5 mentality, not realizing that once you enter the entrepreneurial world, you can almost throw that 9-to-5 out the window, that you're the master of your own calendar. You're going to get the stuff done when you need to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm able to pick him up off the bus and I'm able to do things in the middle of the day. And that's what I have to explain to him is, hey, the reason Dad's doing something on Saturday mornings because of that other stuff that I could do that normally I wouldn't be able to do if I was working 9 to 5. So that's, I try to remind myself that there's not too many years left before he's going to not want to hang out with his father. He's going to want to be with friends and be a moody teenager and all that stuff. So you try to remember it. But I love coaching because I did something this year, which I never thought I'd be able to do. And I decided to take every Friday off. Now I say I take Fridays off. I usually use it to create content, or maybe I'm catching up on things, but I generally don't book calls or appointments on Fridays. And that one move really helped. It re-energized me. I got a ton of content creation done because I just felt free, that I didn't have 8 calls to do or whatever. And that was really good. So that's something I've continued in the fall, and going forward, I'm going to keep doing as well.
And that is extremely powerful. It's a trend that I see more and more, and something I do myself, where I pick one day and I block it off. My phone, it's in airplane mode. Like you cannot call me. But then when you look at your productivity level, you don't have the constant interruptions, and you're able to get things so much more done versus, oh, okay, I need to respond to this. I've got to do this and this and this and this.
Yeah, well, I was listening actually to a podcast interview today at the gym, and James Altucher had Cal Newport on his show. And Cal Newport has written a bunch of books, like Deep Work, I think, is one of them. One of them is something like Be So Good They Can't Ignore You, or something like that. And what he was talking about in that interview is he was talking about attention. I think he called it attention residue. And so what it means is, you may think, oh, it's not, if you're working on, say you're writing something, creating content, oh, I'm going to take just a minute to check in my inbox. And then you look and then you see a couple things. But even if you get right back to your writing, there's still that residue from whatever you saw in your inbox that's on your mind. And then that affects what you're doing with your writing. So it's really dangerous to do that. You're disrupting your flow, but then it's also kind of hovering with you ongoing as well. So I'm getting better at that as well, that, hey, I can't be doing that if I'm switching back and forth and trying to multitask. It's not the way to do it.
Right. Exactly. The concept and notion of multitasking is really being dispelled more, as it's ultimately, when you think about it, it comes down to periods of high non-productivity. Because if you look at the people who are doing it consistently versus that person who chunks their day down into specific tasks, the person who's chunking their day is going to get a substantially larger amount of work done because they're completely focused.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm really big on batching. So I try to batch as much as possible, where certain days are for certain tasks. So Monday is my heavier coaching day with coaching sessions, and some are on Tuesday, but then podcast interviews are on Tuesdays. And then Wednesday morning will be for catch up for whatever I missed for Monday and Tuesday, and Thursday for strategy sessions, and then, like I mentioned, Friday, Saturday, Sunday is more for me recharging, but then also content creation and so on. It just helps get my mind into that flow that it's Monday, I know it's a heavy coaching session day, or it's Tuesday, that's podcast interviews, instead of mixing them in all together, and then I got to switch my brain mode back and forth.
Right, exactly. And I pick Mondays to do all my podcast recording, and I found it was the best thing ever, simply because I'm in that mindset the entire day that it's, you're thinking about, you're creating the stories of what you want to convey to people, and it's so much more productive than when I first started. I would pick a day here, a day there, just whenever I could get somebody
Saturday night at 9:00 podcast interview, and
right.
Have you had any guests on from Australia yet? Those are always,
yes.
It's like 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. my time. Get the Red Bull or whatever going, because it's rough.
Right. And, occasionally, sure, you're making that slight adjustment because of a 14-hour time difference. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward of having the same type of times every single week. So you get that routine going and you develop that flow. And I think that's something that entrepreneurs, especially coaches, need when they're going to start growing their businesses, to figure out what's that pattern that's going to propel them towards the success they're looking for.
Yeah, one thing I actually changed back, I say in the old days, I started my podcast a couple of years ago, it was 2014, and I've done almost 500 episodes. So I've had a lot of time to, to check hits and misses and what I want to change. And back in the old days, I would work around people's schedules a lot. I would get up at 4 a.m. for that guest in Australia. And now I've changed it where I have my hours set up, and it's not me trying to be an a-hole or whatever, but you'll drive yourself crazy if you get trying to change things around for people. So I have my times in the calendar. If someone says, Mark, I can't make that work, can you make it 5 hours later? Can you do it in the middle of the night or whatever? I just say, I'm sorry, I can't. Because I used to do that. It used to really kind of run me down. So I think that's something, if you haven't already, you'll probably start doing it really soon, because you're going to drive yourself crazy if you're getting up at 4 a.m. for podcast interviews.
Right, exactly. I think there's very few times you would ever want to make an exception that, like, let's say like a Tony Robbins or someone like that came to you and said,
Oprah Winfrey wants to come on the show. Great. I'll get up at 3:30 in the morning. We'll do it up, Oprah.
Right. Like, hey, I'm going to be in Paris. Can you do it at 3:30 in the morning? Because it's first thing for me. You're like, sure thing, Oprah, because that's what you're just going to do. But outside of that, no, you're going to be pretty focused. And there's always those very rare exceptions to the rule out there, but for the most part, you have to stick to what you're doing. Otherwise, you're never going to get the things done.
Well, a while back, I had two guests in a relatively short period of time, both from Australia, that wanted on the show. And I caved for one of them, and the other one booked into my schedule. So I think it was 11:30 p.m. her time, or midnight. And I got thinking after I recorded, I said I shouldn't have caved for the first one, because the other one actually stayed up till midnight to make it work, for me and to be on the show and stuff. And I learned a lesson from it. So when other ones came in, future ones with Pacific time's a good example. I got a lot of, people from California who are coming on the show, and they're like, at 7 a.m. my time's a little early. Can you make it whatever time this works best for me? I have to be really careful and say, no, I'm sorry. Here's here's the times, basically. So it's tough because you want to make it work, but if you keep your schedule open so people can control it, you're going to really run yourself down. So I think you have to look at it and say, hey, it's my show, my rules. If you want on the show, great. Here's my schedule, book in with my schedule, but I'm not going to twist everything around for other people.
Right. Exactly. When you mentioned that, I think if a couple of weeks ago, I did an interview. The first interview of the day was with a person that was living in Thailand. So obviously it was the end of, later in the evening for them. But the last interview I did that day was with a person in Australia, and it was first thing in the morning. So there's always a way to make it work. It's just a matter of people just have to adjust their schedule accordingly if they want to really do something.
Or they can move to Texas.
Right.
There's a simple solution.
Right. And if Texas is a little too warm, Canada has a great program where you don't have extremely hot summers, but you need a nice winter jacket. So.
Yes. Yeah, I've got great Wi-Fi in my igloo now. It's perfect.
It's amazing. You get Wi-Fi, indoor plumbing, and igloos.
Yeah.
You're all set. What else do you need, right?
The polar bears make kind of noises outside when you're recording, so you got to watch out for that. But we're good besides that.
Right. Exactly. So now through the whole process, you launch your podcast, because a lot of people talk about that, especially when they're in the coaching world. What's been the benefit or the byproduct of doing your podcast consistently since 2014?
Well, if I look at my coaching business pre-podcast compared to post-podcast, it's no comparison, night and day. So the podcast was really important. It helps with credibility. It helps get your message out there. I've gotten clients who have heard an episode that's 6 months old or a year old, that then come forward. So, but I think the really important thing for people to realize is a lot of people think that, I'll start a podcast and then there's my business right there. People will come to me and I'll have a whole bunch of clients, but that's only half the equation. You also have to have your business set up on the back end. And I see too many people thinking podcasting's that magic bullet that they can just get a podcast started and it's going to instantly monetize. But you also have to have something on the back end. So you get the best podcast in the world, but if you don't have a business to funnel those people into, you're not going to get anything from it. So you need both halves of that equation.
Right, exactly. And the other component, which I think people need to understand, is the length of time you should be committed to doing it. After you launch your podcast, when was it you first started to see results from it?
Oh, not suggesting people follow my lead. With my podcast, I did 7 days a week for the first, I think, 300 episodes. Wow. And then I switched to 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. Then I went to 2 days a week. And actually today, as we're recording, I'm now a weekly show, and that's where it'll stop. So I kind of went backwards. Instead of people start with, say, weekly and then work their way up, I actually got to a point where I said, is my time best spent churning out podcast after podcast, or is it doing other things like, say, getting on to shows like this and doing my other stuff? And interestingly, my business has skyrocketed since I moved the frequency of the podcast down, which is kind of weird. But that's just the way it happened. So for me, I think I got my first client directly from the podcast. It took about 6 weeks. But people always say, 6 weeks, that's not bad. Yeah, but I also did 42 episodes, right? Because I was doing 7 days a week. So that, in reality, that was almost a year's worth of a weekly show if it was being released with that frequency. So I kind of did it a strange way. I recommend for people that they probably start with, say, weekly or so, then they can bump it up once they get their legs under them and they feel that they can handle it. But the other thing, too, I have a twin brother. His name's Matt, and he handles all my editing, my uploading, and all that stuff. I sat on his head for 9 months, so I trust him. I know he's not going to do anything bad for the show. And so I'll put a plug in for him. Podassist.com is his website, but he's been great. He definitely makes my life a lot easier.
Oh, very nice. And that's important that you really recognized the frequency there, because you hear people or you see people in any business venture, they think, well, I put it out there day one. Why aren't people flocking to me?
Yeah, it's like a magic money tree in the backyard. Why aren't the $100 bills rolling in? Yeah,
right. Exactly. That it falls in that category of organic traffic, and it takes time for it to build up. If you look at a lot of well-established podcasts out there, and it looks like a hockey stick where it's sort of slow growth, and then somewhere down the line, and poof, it shoots up.
Yeah, one thing I really hate to hear people saying it because they're putting all their hope on it. But when I hear people saying, "Oh, I want to start a podcast and I'm going to get a bunch of sponsors and that's how I'm going to monetize it," you know what? Sponsorship, that's a great goal to have for your podcast, but it's not as easy as just approaching a few people and someone's going to sign up and throw you gobs of money. You know, I think advertisers are starting to get the value of it, but we're still not even close to being there yet. They're still thinking old school with radio and other stuff. They're not seeing podcasts the way that it will be now. If we were talking 5-10 years down the road, it's a little different. I'm sure that it's going to be more common that people are paying the big bucks for sponsorship. But unless you've got tons of downloads, like I'm talking tons, don't even think of that as your if that's your monetization strategy, you're screwed even coming out of the gate. That should not be your only basket that you have for your eggs. Should have some other ones.
Right, exactly. And not only that, when you think about the whole sponsorship aspect of a podcast, that, you know, typically you're talking, you know, is a certain amount per downloads. So if someone's expecting to get this huge windfall, like, no, you're not going to see that, especially in the early phases of a podcast. So your best bet is it goes back down to having the back-end systems. What programs are you going to be offering? And there's your monetization right there, because you control it. You're not at the mercy of someone saying, well, what can you do to get more downloads? Because we're paying, you know, X amount and we're not seeing the results from it.
Yeah. With podcasting, I view it as kind of one of the legs on the table for my business. So it's a very important part. But then I've got other ones. I've got my Facebook group, which you're in, I believe. So thank you for being in the coaching jungle. That's another one. And then I've got my daily emails where I'm big on email marketing. So I've got that and so on. But it's not like I just put the podcast out there and sat back and said, all right, let's refresh my bank account, you know, every 5 minutes and see the money rolling in. I mean, it doesn't work like that. And it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. There's so many shows popping up, but then so many of them die very quickly because people had these kind of get rich quick ideas and then they don't see it monetizing after a few months and they say, okay, I'm going to quit. And you got to be in it for the long haul. It just doesn't work that way. Right.
Exactly. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine on Friday, and literally, you know, we said that someone, if they're going to start a podcast, they have to have that commitment for 6 to 9 months and not expect to see the results from it yet, because it can literally take that long. Because people want to think, oh, wow, this person's really creating great content. And then it starts happening because it starts showing up more in the feeds. And now people, they begin to trust you because there's so much content that's out there.
Yeah, it's a little different. You know, back in the old days, content wasn't as readily available. And you know what it's like nowadays with the internet? It's like trying to take a sip of water with a fire hose. You could Google absolutely anything and you're going to get 1.2 trillion results in, you know, half a second. So there's not a shortage of content out there for people. And the other thing with podcasts is I think you really have to up your game and have a strong theme, and you gotta make sure that's a good quality product. So if you're going out there with a very loosey-goosey type thing and you know that's way too general and you don't know who you're appealing to and all that stuff, then it's gonna be really difficult to get your head up above the crowd. So with my show, I make no bones about it. Hey, it's for coaches, you know, specifically coaches. I mean, other people can get stuff from it, entrepreneurs and stuff, but it's for coaches, and that's my niche with it. But I think that people have to be really clear on who they're appealing to, and then you can also evolve too. So I know one really successful podcaster, he's on his fourth version of his show now. He admitted to me, you know, it just keeps tweaking every 6 months. He's like, you know what, I'm going to change it up a little bit, and it keeps growing and evolving. So your show could grow as time goes on. It's probably not going to stay the same for 5 years.
Right, exactly. It has to evolve, because if it's the exact same thing, no one's really going to want to pay attention. Even if you look at, let's say, daytime talk shows, they're constantly evolving. It's like, you think of how many of them, they change up the host every couple of years, or there's something different about it. So it's not the same thing. It's not like you look at some of the late night talk shows where it's the same person for 30 years.
Well, look at Jerry Springer. Not that we should use Jerry Springer as a guideline for how to do your podcast, although that would probably get quite a few downloads. But I remember back in the day, I don't know if you ever saw Jerry's first few seasons. Yes. They were boring, because he was trying to do a serious type show and thoughtful and stuff like that. But then once you had the later years with brothers and sisters sleeping together and throwing pies at each other, and little people running out in donkeys and all sorts of stuff, that's when people really started to tune in. So I think he realized that, hey, this is not saying it's the best television out there. I think he realizes that, but that's when he got really big once he had to change. So don't do what Jerry Springer did necessarily, but realize that you have to evolve. And the same way you've probably seen sitcoms. If you ever watch first few seasons of, let's say, The Simpsons, they're horrible. Homer's voice is horrible. They don't have their groove and all that. Now, some people would say after 30 years are horrible now, but it takes a few seasons to really get their feet under them and kind of find their voices and stuff like that. You see it with almost any Friends. It was the same way. The first season or so of Friends, and absolutely every show out there goes the same way. So it takes time to kind of get your voice and get that feeling.
Right, exactly. Now, you mentioned that you have multiple legs to your business. So you have, for bringing in clients, you have podcasting, you have the coaching jungle, you have daily emails. Are there any other legs?
There's other things I do, but those are the big ones. So one thing I've always been really careful with my coaching is to not try to do too many things at once and then not do anything well at all. So one thing that I'm doing in 2017, I'm focusing on more is speaking, for example. And I wanted to, a couple of years ago, I thought, it'd be great to speak. I'd love to travel and all that. But I knew if I tried to chase that rabbit, we were talking about rabbits earlier, then that would affect my coaching and my podcast and everything. So now I've gotten some invites recently to go speak at some conferences and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, the time's right now because I've got my coaching rolling. So if you have, there's a saying Jim Collins has, he says, if you have more than 3 priorities, you don't have any. And unfortunately, too many people out there have 20 priorities and then they get nothing done. So I like to keep it simple.
And that's a great thing to do, is to keep it simple. So now, with the Facebook group, because since social media is such a powerful tool, what have you found to be the best things to grow it? Because you see people wanting just to invite all their friends to Facebook, like, you've got to join this. Like, no, I don't. But,
or they dump people into their group, which is a big no. That's one of my pet peeves. I mean, first world problems, right? But when I see people dumping me into a group for Beanie Baby fans forever 2016 or something like that, I'm like, what the hell? Like, I've never had a Beanie Baby in my life. Well, I'll and that's a long discussion. We could do a couple more shows on Facebook groups, but actually today I just released a show on my podcast. I did a solo show going all through Facebook groups. So feel free to edit this out if it's a shameless plug, but it's naturalborncoaches.com/470. That's 470. And I shared all the secrets because my Facebook group's about a year old as we're recording this, and we've had almost 3,000 people join, and that's with no paid advertising. So I shared some of the secrets and the tips in that solo show.
Oh, excellent! And I'm all about the shameless plug. If what would
life be? Well, in that case, I got 5 programs I want to talk about, and wait now. If you order now, I'll throw in a free toaster.
Does that come with shipping and handling, or is that extra?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'll send one of those ShamWow little things that clean stuff or whatever you see on the infomercials.
Oh, sweet. I've always wanted one of those. That totally makes my day. Now, as we begin wrapping things up here, because you shared so much value in different ways, what's one thing that you'd recommend, whether someone's a coach, an author, speaker, an entrepreneur, that they do if they're truly interested in growing their business?
if they have any perfectionist streak in them, get rid of it as quick as possible, beat it out of them, and never see it again, because that's one of the biggest problems I'm seeing for people. They're spending all their time worrying about how their banner looks on their website, or fiddling around with a PDF or a flyer, and they're worried about all these things that really, in the grand scheme of things, don't matter. And it's a way to feel busy, but they're not in front of people and actually talking to people who could hire them. So the way that I always give a description is it's almost like a war. The battlefield, there's a lot of people that are in that foxhole, safe in the trench, fiddling around with their banners and all the little stuff, but where the rewards are out on that battlefield, and sometimes you're going to get your arm blown off or shot or whatever, you're going to get beat around a little bit, but that's where the rewards are. And you have to get out of your foxhole and get out onto the battlefield. And the battlefield in business is talking to people who could potentially hire you. And that's how I look at things. Even now, I don't rest on my laurels. I'm reaching out to people. I'm booking calls. I'm filling up. Grant Cardone says white space is a devil, for your calendar. You got to fill that calendar up. And that's what people have to do. But if you're a perfectionist, and I've seen this in my business, I see people literally take 3, 4, 5 months to do a simple lead magnet as a coach. And that's something that should take maybe a day, if that, to get done. That's just way too long. And you're going to get steamrolled if it's taking you 4 months to get a PDF done. You're done before you even get started.
Right. Exactly. You have to just get it out there. If it doesn't work, so what? Create another one.
My first lead magnet was the crappiest lead magnet you'd ever see. It was, I think, 5 books every entrepreneur should read. So it'd be like Think and Grow Rich with, maybe a couple sentences about that book, and, how to win friends and influence people or whatever. And it was done on a simple Word doc, and it was not pretty. It was pretty bad, but you know what? People downloaded it. It got me talking to people, and then I improved every 6 months or so. I'll change my lead magnet, and they've been getting better and better. So I've got another shameless plug, my ebooks, my current lead magnet on my website, naturalborncoaches.com. But that's much better than my old lead magnet I used 3 years ago, for example.
Oh, excellent. And that's just what you have to do, is that constant evolution of what's going to work. But until you put it out there, you never know. If you're trying to be perfect, I've got to create the perfect lead magnet. Well, the perfect lead magnet that's never released never is going to generate any business, versus the one that looks ugly that gets business in. Well, it speaks for itself.
Well, some of the most popular websites out there are some of the ugliest as well. So if you look at, say, the Drudge Report, it gets a billion hits a month. I think it's probably going crazy now that we're in election season. That's an ugly website. If you look at it just for pure design, I've seen some websites that are beautiful design, but knowing the story behind the people there, they don't have 2 nickels to rub together. Their business, they're not doing anything, but they spend all their time on these beautiful websites and they don't have a business. So don't get hung up on that. If you're a perfectionist, you got to get that out of your system quickly.
Right. When it comes to websites, I like to tell people, if you're thinking about making it super complicated, look at the world's most popular website, Google.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty basic. You go to any page, there's a limited amount of stuff on it.
Yeah.
And
Bing is a nicer looking site if you look at Bing. And I know a fair number of people use Bing, but it's nowhere close to Google. And that's a perfect example.
Right. Sometimes the simpler, the better. Don't make it overly complicated, because you got to reach the masses. So now, how can people be able to find you and learn more about the programs that you offer and ultimately receive some of your daily emails?
Sure. Yeah. Best spot, central hub, is naturalborncoaches.com.
Okay. Excellent. And hopefully people want to reach out to you. They'll subscribe to your emails and say, we love the plugs. We want them more and more and more.
Yes. Here, take my money, Mark. Sell me.
Right. They're coming, they're running toward you with Visa and MasterCard saying, come, please. We want to go sit out at South Fork Ranch.
Yeah. Well, all kidding aside, I do make sure I give a lot of value. So people going to that website or the Facebook group, final plug, I promise, Byron, no more plugs this interview, but thecoachingjungle.com, www.thecoachingjungle.com is the Facebook group. And we've got almost 3,000 awesome people like yourself in there. And I mean, I've had people say that group is better than paid groups that they've been in, and it's a free group with lots of value. So we'd love to have them in the Facebook group too.
Oh, excellent. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for coming onto the Big Movement podcast today and sharing your wisdom about entering the coaching role and doing what it takes to grow a business in today's marketplace.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Big Movement Podcast today. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Now that you've surely been inspired to take your entrepreneurial career and business to the next level, you can stop by the website and get more. And if you're ready to boost your business brand, be sure to grab your free report, 7 Easy Steps to Build Your Brand Today.